So, as I mentioned, we are continuing the discussion on the 6 perfections. And in the Mahayana tradition, this is the vehicle. These 6 perfections, or virtues, are the path that leads the bodhisattva, those who are dedicated to benefit beings. This is the path to enlightenment. So they consist of generosity, ethical discipline, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, sometimes also called meditation, and wisdom, the result of those, the practices, the completion. So again, these 6 perfections are perfect generosity, perfect ethical discipline, and the like. They're taught in a particular order, so even the bodhisattvas practice these independently, individually, starting with generosity. They build one upon the other, and ultimately resting with the Prajna Paramita, or wisdom, that brings forth another view of these perfections and enhances it. So although these are within us as a part of our Buddha nature, because of our obscurations, because of our wrong view, because of our ignorance, they're obscured. So it requires all of these particular aspects, starting with generosity, moving towards these other ones, having the discipline.
So they have to be cultivated.
They have to be cultivated.
Okay.
I was listening yesterday to a book, and it's on just sort of the basic foundations of Buddhism, I guess. But there was a whole first section on the Buddha, and it was talking about how he spent, lifetimes. There's stories about him spending lifetimes of working on just one of those, so.
Yeah. So there's the generosity of physical things, the generosity of giving dharma, the generosity of giving his body. He tossed his body over a cliff to feed the lions or the tigers. And I'm not advising that, but when you see this body is ephemeral, and this is the ultimate aspect of generosity. But within that, just to give our time, again, we talked about generosity, so I won't go into a great deal of detail. You can check the YouTube to pick that up. But the 6 perfections are not placed in this order by accident. It has a very particular order, kind of explained from lower to higher practice, or from gross to subtle. The supreme of these being the wisdom that is established, the Prajna Paramita, and that means wisdom, but it also includes the sutras or teachings of the Buddha on that topic, which is ultimately emptiness, understanding the nature of reality. And we'll come to that when we talk about the 6th, which is wisdom. People often confuse this idea of emptiness with nothingness, which it is not, which tends to lead to a nihilistic idea that nothing exists, that nothing matters. That is very far from the truth. Everything has its seed in causes and conditions, and the direct experience of our Buddha nature is wisdom. And that's cultivated by these 6 perfections. Meditation is also one, or concentration is what we're going to talk about today as well. So these last 3 are very important in traversing the path of the bodhisattva. It's impossible, to attain Buddhahood without cultivating these virtues. Yes?
Would you say that this experience of emptiness or suchness, would you compare it to the non-identification with phenomena that arise?
Ultimately, one to attain Buddhahood has to realize a certain non-attachment and renunciation of worldly activity, and disengage from this clinging to this personal self, this egoistic self that cares more about it than anything else, and is the center of its universe, seeing that we are all part of this cultivating virtue and to attain Buddhahood. And the Mahayana tradition is the goal. So practice, disengaging from the clinging or attachment to the self, which is doesn't exist. That's really the idea of the understanding of emptiness. We have reified a self. We think that it's real, so we say, me, mine, I. But any part of that, we say, oh, this is my nose. But where is your nose? You touch it here. Is this your nose? Is this your nose? Is this? There's really no nose. There's no cup. It is all causes and conditions. And the Buddha, when we look at Buddhism, it is more of a science, really, than a religion. And as we look at what Einstein and Niels Bohr and all these people said about the more you look at phenomenon, the more you see it will disintegrate in front of you. It consists of parts. These parts are ephemeral. These don't really have any essential quality. So we're coming now, when we look at quantum physics and this aspect of science, it is what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. So when I say this is more of a science than a religion, it doesn't mean that we don't look at the esoteric aspects and cultivate certain virtues that are within traditions and meditation and those kinds of things, but it does not contradict science at all.
Our instruments refine the observation of phenomena and dissolve, if you will, the gross material qualities that conventional perception experience. So would you say that through the cultivation of meditative awareness, one begins to experience phenomena in the same manner that these refined instruments do?
Well, because, there's relative reality and ultimate reality, when we look at the nature of reality. So relative reality, all the things that we can see, hear, touch, taste, smell, is relative reality. And conventional science really can only quantify or look at those things like that. So beyond that, consciousness sees this as arising out of emptiness. So this is a greater, again, ultimate reality can only be done with realizing the nature of one's own mind or Buddha nature. That's ultimate wisdom. It's ultimate understanding. These other conventional kinds of things can only see relative reality. We can make certain conjectures, or we hypothesize, which they do, about the nature of reality outside of those things, but having the direct experience. The nature of a Buddha's realization is omniscient, knows the causes and conditions of arising of phenomenon. And that is beyond, I think, a certain amount of quantification.
So it goes beyond the quantum analysis of phenomena. Does it just take one to the point where the quantum arising is perceived as coming from the essence, if you will?
Well, Einstein would say so.
What would Buddha say?
Absolutely. These are not mutually exclusive things, two sides of the same coin. These are just as we look at samsara and nirvana, they're empty of any essential quality. So all these things, again, are just come out of uprising of causes and conditions. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. So the six perfections. So we were saying one leads to the other. So starting with generosity, to be able to give, to practice generosity. We accept. Then comes our morality, and then ethical discipline comes out of that. The rise of patience. From patience, we can have enthusiastic effort. You can see a kind of a hierarchy or kind of a progression here. And the from enthusiastic effort, we have this internal, it comes from an internal understanding of our priorities. Then we can devote ourselves to concentration, and our concentration is divided, in meditation into shamatha, which is even placement or tranquility meditation, to just relax and soothe, quiet, ground the mind, and then the more analytical meditation, we get to see the nature of reality and cut through the illusions. That leads to the ultimate understanding of emptiness and wisdom. So all of these things, the generosity, the ethical discipline, the patience, the enthusiastic effort, concentration, and ultimately leads to wisdom, Prajna Paramita. And even the wisdom part, it continues to be cultivated until across these, there are 10 levels, as it is said, of bodhisattvas as they traverse the path. And each level, one begins to disengage from the clinging to this self. And at the last stages, there's still a little, it says, odor of ego, a little kind of fragrance of this ego until it's gone. And at that point, one transcends from the higher level bodhisattvas to actual Buddhahood. And even in that, the transition is tremendous. But we all have that capacity, and you will all be Buddhas, but it will require some focus. It will require some discipline. It will require some perseverance in the practice. And I use the example, excuse me, of it doesn't matter if you want to be a skilled physician or if you want to be a concert pianist or you want to be a world-class athlete. That generally does not happen by itself. We have to put some energy into that. And so the bodhisattva sees the importance of not wasting this precious human birth. So we talked briefly last time about the aspects that turn the mind towards the Dharma, understand the preciousness of this human birth, understanding impermanence, that this life is short, understanding karmic causes and conditions, that what you're thinking right now leads to a future action. So cultivating this virtue leads as the cause of your realizing Buddhahood, and the unsatisfactoriness of going around and around from birth, death, rebirth, in this cycle of samsara is considered unsatisfactory. We want to, at this time, focus our opportunities. We have all of the causes and conditions. We have all of the faculties necessary to realize our Buddha nature. And to waste it, to throw away, and to squander it like we have done since beginningless time, there's a point when we say no more. So that's why you have to disengage a little bit. Renunciation is considered important, but it doesn't mean you have to hide away in the Himalayas. It just means your attitude is not clinging to the external world. We are in the world. We have these bodies. We are, engaged in physical activity every day. But our clinging to it, our attachment to these things, and our running after certain things that are ephemeral, will ultimately be the source of suffering and not the source of our liberation. So with that understanding, we can turn our minds towards the Dharma and pursue it with vigor. Any question about, does any of this make sense? Yeah? Good. All right. So the idea of, the bodhisattva ideal is to benefit oneself, a twofold benefit. You benefit oneself through understanding and quelling and moving through negative emotions that we've been, again, cultivating since beginningless time. Our anger, our jealousy, our greed, our, all these kinds of things, we can transmute and turn to virtue. So this is that benefits ourselves, but it also benefits other beings, and we see other beings as suffering, and we have the strong motivation to be of benefit to others, to end their suffering as well as our own. The only way we can be of any value to anyone else is to attain Buddhahood ourselves. That way we have the insight, we have the wisdom to know what's needed in that situation and the skill to bring it forth. So all of these things help to transform these perfections into habits. We've got negative habits that we've been cultivating since beginningless time. So this is a way to cultivate the virtues and to take take advantage of this precious human birth. So I won't be able to go over the previous ones, but I started last week just talking a little bit about the enthusiastic effort, which we have to kind of think about as being the root of all perfections. If we don't make effort, then nothing's going to happen. So to understand that this enthusiastic effort or enthusiasm, this energetic, joyful striving to cultivate these qualities is essential to our bringing them forth. It's our motivation. We have to have the right motivation and then apply the effort. So we have to have, the why. Why are we going to do this? Because we suffer, basically. The Buddha is Four Noble Truths when he first began teaching said there is suffering. Yes, there's suffering because of our ignorance, and we all want to be happy. All sentient beings want to be happy. That is fundamental to the smallest ant, to the any sentient being wants to be happy. They don't want to suffer. Unfortunately, we aren't very skillful in how we do that. In fact, we usually bring more suffering upon ourselves through this clinging, through our wrong effort. So these, the Buddha taught very specifically how to transcend our negative clinging aspects and how to cultivate virtue. Yeah.
The joyful enthusiasm to pursue the perfections, where does one draw the joyful quality of that? I could see the determination coming quite naturally out of the wish to quiet the unsatisfactory quality of conventional experience. Where does the joyful nature of that effort, where does it draw itself from?
As one progresses along the path, one sees where you're putting your energy, where what is your striving, and so the enthusiastic effort itself. There are three types of this effort. The enthusiastic effort as armor, as it is said, and that is the courage or energy that to withstand difficulties. We are going to have obstacles in our way, but as we cultivate this enthusiastic effort as armor, the things that come to us, we're able to transmute these burdens, and that transmutation gives us it's like emotional or mental muscle, that creates more joy for ourselves. When doing things for yourself, you get the thing and you say, well, that was nice, I wanted this thing, but now what? Then there's another thing, or there's another job, or the relationship fails, or I want the bigger house, or my car's falling apart. There's always some external thing that we are attracted to, that at a point we say, this is really not, these are all impermanent, ephemeral. I get the message that this is not making me happy. What will, as one does their practice, will reduce the negative clinging, the negative attachment that creates the anger, that creates the pride, that creates the greed, that creates the jealousy. These negative emotions or kleshas create suffering. At a point, you cut through that and say that, well, that's really not working so well. So that comes out of understanding. It comes out, as you say, from meditative awareness and mindfulness. You see certain things create certain realities in our life.
When I consider this, I think now that we're talking about that as one cultivates through this particular path, cultivates loving kindness and compassion, that arises the joyful determination to pursue vigorously the path, if you will. In my own experience, that's really the heart of the joyful nature of it, because the determination can come from the wish to diminish suffering, no doubt about it. But the joyful quality comes from cultivating loving kindness and compassion for others.
That's correct. That's correct. But it's also cultivated by, as we say, this enthusiastic effort that it's kind of an armor that protects us. It's also through our positive actions, the diligence that it takes to do that. That striving also creates the virtue, and so we can join. Everything begins working together: our body, our speech, our mind. We have congruence. So once that happens, there's also an energy, and we can look at that even from a psycho-spiritual kind of transmutation that occurs. That when we're happy, when we do something that is beneficial for others, it actually changes our hormones, it changes our neurotransmitters, it changes the way we feel, our actions, our activity, our thoughts. So as we transmute that, the psychoneuroimmunology is a field of psychology that reinforces this idea that, and if you look at the Dalai Lama, if you look at our teachers, they're happy, they're laughing. Doesn't negate their understanding of suffering. That is the Buddha's first noble truth. There is suffering. We know there's suffering, but being able to benefit beings, to cultivate this enthusiastic effort, to engage in that activity, brings about a change in one's being and causes these conditions and allows the growth of this joyful perseverance, this enthusiastic effort. And so the enthusiastic effort is armor, diligence in positive actions, and the third that's called of these three aspects of enthusiastic effort is insatiable enthusiastic effort, as it is called. And that's devoting all of your energy to the benefit of others, working with others. And it's compared to being like a river. Once you're in it, the river is just carrying you. And we've converted, or we've created the circumstances or causes and conditions where it becomes a natural kind of activity, this joyful perseverance in the practice of the Dharma.
It takes a certain type of maturity to reflect upon the reality that when we're pursuing our own ends, there is an inherent unsatisfactoriness in that pursuit. And when we're pursuing the benefit of others, there's an inherent happiness in that pursuit. That takes a certain maturity upon reflection, because most of us, we're in this realm of desire. And we're just swimming up along the momentum of that realm of desire. And to pause, to be able to actually reflect on that, to me, it requires a certain maturity. Yeah. Because everybody's suffering, but how many of us stop to reflect upon why are we suffering? I mean, we have cars, we have this, we have that, we have everything. We're living like gods. Why are we suffering anyway? So to pause, not many of us are pausing to say, well, every time I'm chasing what I want, it doesn't give me any lasting happiness.
So that comes as a matter of our concentration, our focus, our meditation. So, and the insight that comes when we observe the nature of mind, we observe the nature of thoughts, we're propelled by these thoughts, negative thoughts, different kinds of drives, and then it gives us, as you say, a little space to observe that clinging observe that, and most of the thoughts we have are just repeated over and over and over and over again. So we're able to deconstruct that mental process and observe it with a certain detachment. That's what insight meditation is about. We observe it like a scientist observing their experiment. Oh, that's interesting, the thought that comes through there. That's interesting. But we don't have to believe everything our mind says, and we don't have to act on everything our mind says. We don't have to say everything that comes through our mind stream. But we can see it, and then that makes our reality much broader. And we are able to make certain decisions and not just have a knee-jerk response to some thought, feeling, emotion. We're engaged with somebody, they say something, we immediately respond to that in some kind of reflex. Instead of being responsive, we're reactive. We can respond to things and have a choice. It gives us a much broader view of how we want to respond. We can be responsible in the larger sense of the word, responsible. And Buddhism is very responsible, very self-reliant. We don't blame anyone for the situation. We can't say this is God's fault. We can't say that, this is, we're responsible for our actions. And we always have choice, in our activity. So with that understanding, then we make choices that are congruent with our wish to cultivate these 6 virtues, 6 perfections. And the more congruent we can be with this, actually the happier we will be. So there's not this cognitive dissonance. You do something like this and you say, I shouldn't have done that. When we do that, there's an immediate loss of energy. That contradiction, that situation is exhausting. If we live, and that's why one of these, we talk about ethical or morality, you can't attain Buddhahood or a higher state of realization if you're living an immoral, unethical life, because there's a tremendous contradiction with that. So you're cultivating energy as a result of doing that. It has a forward momentum, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's catalytic, it just kind of, it's catalyst, yeah.
2 things. The term choice. Most of us don't experience true choice. We're more reactive to what arises in us.
That's why we call them habitual patterns.
Yeah.
It's just the grooves in the record. We keep doing the same thing over and over again. But we do have the opportunity to change.
So choice, in my mind, please help, only comes from cultivating what you're calling detachment. I call it spaciousness, because to me the term detachment means it's removed from our experience.
Spaciousness works fine. I often use that as well.
Includes the arising, but it doesn't attach to the arising. It's a broader view, if you will, rather than a narrower view. So choice really only arises, in my mind, and perhaps you could help, from cultivating that spaciousness through meditative awareness. Otherwise, we're not really choosing, because we don't have the space to say, well, let me just look at this with equanimity, rather than having something biased by the momentum of our habitual.
No, these are causes and conditions that push us along. And until we begin this process of observation, meditation, awareness, mindfulness, then we're just pushed along. We're blown like a snowflake in the wind, as you say. And we think we're free. We are not free. So point well taken. So this is part of the cultivation of mindfulness. Then we do have choice. Then we do have freedom. Generally, there is no freedom. Comment? Yes? That's how a Buddha responds naturally, yes, in the moment, without contradiction or expectation or all of the other hopes and fears that generate all of it. It's exhausting. So, the 5th, we mentioned the joyful perseverance. The next is concentration and meditation, which is really the ground of progress on the path. The ability to concentrate, sometimes called even placement. The word that is often used in Sanskrit is shamatha, or tranquility meditation. It's the meditation that we teach when we're doing our practice here in the mornings, shamatha, tranquility meditation. To first of all, quiet the mind. Before you can concentrate or focus without distraction, you have to quiet it down. So it's not chasing after all the different aspects, and to be able to stay focused and develop concentration and stabilize the mind and refine the intellect. This shamatha is the tool that we use. And it's essential to the other practices of the first four paramitas that we talked about as well. Yeah. That's why the Buddha taught the many different vehicles that he taught. He first started with the Hinayana because it was way too much for people to think about emptiness and non-self, and that the people, and when he first taught it, people started going nuts, you know. So in a sense, yes, we have these bodies identified with the body, but ultimately, his last 20 years of teaching was about emptiness. So one, just like a kindergartner, starts and progresses along the path, you don't want to get stuck with that idea that yes, there is a conventional reality, a cup. Yes, we do have these bodies, but ultimately they are empty of any essential nature. Where is your you-ness? Where is the cupness? It doesn't exist. We identify it or give it a name, and then we think we know something about it. But in reality, it does not exist. There's protons, neutrons, electrons floating around and then dropping off. And there's lots of space. So just don't be hung up or attached or reify this body, knowing that it is, we've created an idea, a concept about it. That's not real. The woundedness is also illusory, so it is important to, in terms of the Dharma, to have a person understand that elusive nature of self. There's suffering, there's a cause of that suffering, and there's a way out of that suffering. So, yes, having the right view is a noble eightfold path, but the first of those is having the right view. But usually a person who is suffering is so attached to their sense of self that they can't see anything past that. That's just me, I. Actually, there's quite a range of practices, when we talk about meditation, the calm abiding meditation that I mentioned, shamatha. This absorption, cultivating the mind, not to be disturbed, or when the mind wanders, we're aware of it wandering, we bring it back. So we usually use the breath as the focus or the anchor for that, and then the special insight meditation, vipassana, latong in the Tibetan, vipassana in the Sanskrit. The analytical meditation would begin to break things down and say, when a thought comes in, what is the nature of that thought? Where does it come from? What size is it? Where is it? And we can just do everything in a certain kind of way. I often use the example, if you're in a bamboo forest and you cut a piece of bamboo and you see that it's hollow inside, you don't have to cut down all of the bamboo to know, oh, it's hollow inside. These thoughts, these things have no essential nature and are essentially hollow.
I think many of us, all humans, are cultivating at different moments of every day awareness, attentiveness to the moment, because in order to develop life skills, walking, talking, all the skills that we develop as humans require attentiveness to cultivate them. The thing that eludes us in conventional existence is all those moments that don't require that attentiveness, that where we allow ourselves to daydream or think about, invest in past thoughts, future thoughts, etc. the intervals between cultivating the skill base to be humans in conventional existence is the use of the mind to, in one point, to awareness. It's realizing the importance to extend that attentiveness to the intervals that don't require the skills that we cultivate in conventional existence.
Yeah, if you're in the Serengeti and a tiger's running after you, you're going to be very attentive. Generally, we're not. And you can tell the chef, how many cuts he has on his fingers. The carpenter says, yes, I have 3 children. Anyway, cultivating mindfulness, generally we are on automatic pilot, and our habitual patterns and our thoughts continually override our ability to be one-pointedly in this moment. We are not in this moment. We are projecting into the future, we're reflecting on the past, and we are not in this moment. Rarely are we in the moment. You can be doing something and still be scattered and not in the moment. I agree with you that there should be, there is a inner wiring that if you are in danger, like if a car's coming at you, it slows down. I mean, if you've ever been in a situation, time slows down. You're seeing this thing in like slow-mo. Your mind is so geared into this. I had that experience. I'm not so convinced that we're so awake and aware of what's going on moment to moment. Generally, we're not. We can be. That's the nature of the mind. Again, is to be clear and aware in this moment without distraction, and we can cultivate that through meditation, and that's the point.
I think that this particular path of cultivating being lovingly aware of moment to moment makes life a whole lot more joyous. And that's the compelling part of the Vajrayana path in using the mind training and cultivating loving awareness of the moment is extraordinary.
Yeah, 2 wings of the bird. We have to have loving kindness and compassion, but that is going to not give us the whole picture unless we have the wisdom to go with it. And the wisdom is not going to give us the whole picture unless we have the loving kindness and compassion. Those are considered the 2 wings of the bird that will take us to the goal of enlightenment. So both of those are essential. One's not any more essential than the other. Compassion, loving kindness, very important. But wisdom, understanding, also very important. So how do we put that into the context of our situation? Both of those are very important.
Would not one lead to the other? I've been with the Theravadins, and they are using emptiness, anatta, as the primary process. But those that I've been with have been extraordinarily loving and kind. So my sense of it is that they're employing both wings of the bird, just as the Mahayana disciple who's using loving kindness and compassion is also spontaneously cultivating wisdom.
Yeah. So, I mean, the words are just the words. A Hinayana, so-called Hinayana practitioner, if they're cultivating loving kindness and compassion, it's a Mahayana point of view. And a Mahayana practitioner who isn't cultivating loving kindness or isn't doing that is not a Mahayana practitioner either. So it's hard to know where a person is, unless you're inside their head, or you're a Buddha, that you can be, you can read minds. That is a skill and a siddhi that goes with Buddhahood, or even advanced bodhisattvas. There are siddhis or powers that come with that realization. Generally, the Hinayana path is about escaping samsara for their own benefit and understanding that they want to reach nirvana. And so they are very disciplined in their practice, so they can disengage very completely and totally, but generally have not cultivated loving kindness and compassion of the bodhisattva. That's the difference. The bodhisattva in the Mahayana tradition is cultivating, the emphasis is on both loving kindness and compassion, cultivating that, as well as the realization of wisdom, Prajna. So in our practice of meditation, we talk about the concentration like a good bowstring. So like a lute, you don't want to be too tight and stressed out, but you don't want to be too relaxed and lethargic, or because the energy tends to get kind of dark or collapsed. So like a good lute, that you're not too tight, not too loose. So in your meditation, you're cultivating the right mindfulness like that. So, and we talk about that, when we talk about the meditation. So we can, for those of you who come on in the mornings and we give meditation instruction, we talk about how to practice successfully, mindfully, but it's not just on the cushion, just to be, it's 24/7. It's not just following the breath for 15, 20 minutes on your cushion. It is about being mindful in our body, speech, and mind with those that we're engaged in, our family, our friends, our workmates, what we're doing to be fully focused. The nature of the mind is clear awareness. So to be in the moment as purely as we can be, that is going to bring happiness. To be present-centered. That's really what mindfulness is. So oh my goodness, okay. We're going to do this. The last one is wisdom, or prajna. The perfection of wisdom, the sixth perfection, transcendental wisdom, or called Prajna Paramita in Sanskrit. The perfection of wisdom is omniscience. It may be difficult to wrap your head around omniscience, knowing past, present, and future. Knowing the minds of all sentient beings, knowing the causes and conditions, knowing ultimate and relative reality. Only enlightened Buddha possesses this kind of wisdom. And it is the goal of the Mahayana practitioner to cultivate these virtues that culminates in this final goal, the perfection of wisdom, and is both the path, the cause, and the result of ending in enlightenment. All these six paramitas, these six virtues, are the causes, and the result is the perfection of wisdom. So it's both its cause and its effect. We use the wisdom to continue to cultivate the other paramitas as well. Wisdom is always practiced in performing the other perfections as well. So it is really to develop this practice of perfection of wisdom, is to develop the ability to see reality without our false conceptuality. We were saying that often, we see things based on our beliefs, based on our concepts, based on our history, but not reality as it is. You think it's that way? Mm-hmm. I think so. So through this, one gets rid of their negative emotions, their disturbing emotions, we call them kleshas, and there's a natural uprising of compassion, as we mentioned, and the ultimate result is that one becomes a Buddha, which, again, is not something outside of you. You already have all those qualities, conditions, and are a Buddha. And when the Buddha became enlightened under the Bodhi tree, and when he began his teaching, those that had known him before saw his radiance and his countenance and how it changed, and they asked, "Oh, who are you?" And he said, "I am awake." So we are awake to our essential nature. we have awakened from the illusion or the dream of our separateness and our clinging to this wrong idea of self. So the idea of having, through the right view, through the cultivation of these generosity, patience, ethics, perseverance, meditation, and ultimately wisdom, we're able to attain those conditions that lead to Buddhahood. And ultimately is the goal and our destiny, sooner or later. So wisdom through hearing, studying, teaching, this is how we cultivate it. First, you kind of you hear it, and then you kind of chew on it, make it your own, and then you practice it. And the wisdom, comes out of that practice. The insight meditation, vipassana, the shamatha, tranquility meditation, the insight and wisdom comes from these practices. So we pretty much, I think, explored most of what we needed to do. Are there any other questions? There's a lot more. There's, as I say, the Buddha taught 20 years on emptiness and the wisdom teachings of the Prajna Paramita. So we just have to understand a little bit that these qualities that we're talking about are is the path of the Bodhisattva. This is the Bodhi means enlightened, Sattva means mind or intention. So this is the mind of enlightenment. It's often translated like that. But we're dispelling our ignorance to become a Buddha. We have the intention to benefit beings. That is the aspect of the Bodhisattva attitude. So this is the ideal Mahayana practitioner, the Bodhisattva. And there are those, in terms of the path, one begins to hear the teachings, begins to say, this seems real. This is something that I want to continue. So one then takes refuge in the Buddha, what are called the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And as one practices a period of time, one can also take bodhisattva vows. That is the vow to be of benefit to beings. There's also the lay vows that one takes, not to kill, not to lie, not to steal, not to engage in harmful sexual behavior, not to engage in use of drugs or those things that obscure or cloud the mind. So these are added kind of aids, along the path. So if one wants to know more about those things, we'll be talking more about that as we go. But the bodhisattva deeds are guided by compassion and loving kindness. That is really the ground for the cultivation of these virtues, and it's what leads ultimately to Buddhahood. But we couldn't do this if we didn't already have what the Buddha called Buddha nature. This is our essential nature that we're just bringing out, realizing, and we won't find it outside of ourselves. So the more you search externally for these things, the further away, it gets. We all have the potential, this Buddha nature, Buddha essence. And we cultivate it, or we find it through this kind of inner development. So when I say that Buddhism is a very self-reliant kind of practice, that means that no one can do it for you. If the Buddha could do it for you, you'd all be enlightened. You would do it. But even he said, I can't do it. You have to do it for yourself. And with that, community is very important, like-minded people to practice together, to work with each other, to facilitate each other. the Buddha thought that community was also very important. So we take our refuge, we cultivate the vows and lay vows, bodhisattva vows. There are many practices that help and serve as catalysts to this goal. The Buddha was very skillful, taught 84,000 different methods to attain Buddhahood, to clarify our mind, and to attain the state. Prajna Paramita, wisdom. So, no questions? Everyone's got it? May it be so, yeah. The armor-like diligence, it's going to happen, and there'll be frustrations, there'll be obstacles, and until we are adamantine in that state of awareness of a Buddha, there'll be ups and downs. That's a given. So don't be distracted. It's a symptom of not being a Buddha. So just have that armor-like perseverance, discipline, to say, great, Buddha feeling a little bit frustrated. No big deal. Sometimes you'll feel like you're in, as you say, square one. But other times you say, oh, this is good. I'm making progress. But we'll make progress as we get that mental muscle, and we have that practice, and more we experience the benefits. But it's not unusual to not have that 24/7. We're not Buddhas yet. You'll have that when you attain Buddhahood. Okay. No final questions?